They thought they had me trapped, living in their house like some grateful charity case while bleeding my bank account dry. My son and his wife had no idea that the frail old woman they'd been exploiting for 2 years was about to become worth $53 million. And they definitely didn't expect what happened next. Let me take you back to where this all began, 3 weeks ago on a bitter December morning in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The snow was coming down hard, making every step to Rodriguez's corner store feel like a small victory against the elements. But I'd made this walk every Friday for 32 years, rain or shine, and I wasn't about to stop now. My name is Margaret Thompson, though most folks call me Maggie. At 67, I'm what some people might call a creature of habit. Every Friday, same store, same lottery ticket, same numbers I've been playing since 1992. Those numbers weren't random, they told the story of my life. 7 for the day I married my beloved Bob. 14 for Brian's birthday. 23 for our wedding anniversary. 31 for the house number where we built our family. 45 for the decades Bob and I shared before cancer took him. And 18 for Brian's graduation day. Back when I still believed I'd raised a son who understood the meaning of family loyalty. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," called Tyler Rodriguez from behind the counter. Even at 25, he remembered the days when I'd bring little Brian in for penny candy. The usual today? I handed him my $5, the same amount I'd been investing in hope every week for over 3 decades. As Tyler printed out my ticket with those familiar numbers 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18, I tucked it safely into my purse next to Bob's old driver's license that I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. "Cross your fingers for me, Tyler," I said, same as always. "Always do, Mrs. Thompson. This could be your lucky week." If only he knew how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Walking back through the December chill, I passed the White House with black shutters where Bob and I had spent 43 beautiful years. The new owners had painted it yellow, which would have broken Bob's heart. He always said our house looked dignified, like a place where decent people lived and raised their children with proper values. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me that the child I'd raised in that dignified home was now treating me like nothing more than a source of monthly income. 2 years ago, when Bob lost his battle with cancer, I thought my world had ended. I never imagined it was just the beginning of a different kind of nightmare. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and condolences, but what I remember most clearly was the conversation that happened afterward, as Brian drove me home from the cemetery. "Mom, you can't stay in that big house by yourself," he said, his voice full of what sounded like genuine concern. "It's not safe at your age." From the passenger seat, Stephanie chimed in with her perfectly rehearsed worried expression. "What if you fall? What if something happens and nobody finds you for days? We have that guest room that barely gets used, and you could help us with the grandchildren when they visit." Help with the grandchildren. I should have recognized that as the first red flag, but grief has a way of making you vulnerable to manipulation, especially when it comes from people you trust. Their house was everything mine wasn't: modern, sprawling, expensive. A colonial mansion in the newer part of town with a 3-car garage, and a kitchen island bigger than my first apartment. They'd stretched their budget to what Stephanie called the absolute limit to afford it, though I later learned they'd blown right past any reasonable limit and kept going. The guest room was pleasant enough: pale yellow walls, white furniture, a view of their meticulously maintained backyard. "Think of it like a comfortable hotel," Stephanie said, fluffing the pillows with theatrical enthusiasm. "Your own space but with family nearby." For the first month it actually felt like family. I cooked most of the meals, kept the house spotless, and tried to stay out of the way when Brian and Stephanie needed privacy. They seemed grateful for the help, though I noticed they never offered to share the grocery bills or utility costs, despite the fact that my entire Social Security check was going toward what Stephanie euphemistically called household expenses. By the second month, the requests began. "Maggie, could you watch Lily and Connor this weekend? We need some couple time." "Maggie, could you handle the cable repairman? We'll both be at work." "Maggie, could you pick up our dry cleaning while you're out?" Slowly but systematically, I was being transformed from a house guest into unpaid domestic help, but I told myself it was temporary, just until the grief softened enough for me to figure out my next move. That's when Stephanie called her first family meeting about finances. She'd laid out papers on the kitchen table like she was conducting a board meeting, which in retrospect, she essentially was. "We need to discuss the living arrangement," she announced with a kind of smile that never reached her eyes. The itemized list she slid across the table made my stomach drop. $800 monthly rent for the guest room, $200 for utilities, $300 for food and household supplies, $1,300 total, exactly $50 less than my monthly Social Security check. "This seems high for one person," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you're using all the facilities," Stephanie countered smoothly. "Kitchen, bathroom, laundry. And when the grandchildren visit, you're here the whole weekend, which significantly increases our costs." Lily and Connor were Brian's children from his first marriage, 8 and 10 years old, full of the kind of innocent energy that made me remember why being a grandmother was supposed to be one of life's greatest joys. Of course, Stephanie had a different perspective on their visits, as I discovered one day when I overheard her phone conversation with her sister. "It's exhausting having kids here every other weekend," she complained, not realizing I could hear from the laundry room where I was folding their clothes. "And now with Maggie here too. It's like I'm running some kind of boarding house." I signed the financial agreement because what choice did I have? Finding an apartment at my age with only $50 left over each month wasn't realistic. Brian assured me it was temporary, just until they could figure out a long-term solution that worked for everyone. The long-term solution, as it turned out, involved making me increasingly invisible while maximizing my usefulness. By fall, I was doing all the shopping, most of the cooking, and all of the cleanup. When Lily and Connor visited, I was their primary caretaker while Brian and Stephanie went out for romantic dinners or weekend getaways. When they entertained friends, I was expected to serve drinks and appetizers, then disappear upstairs like some Victorian servant. The moment that changed everything happened during one of Stephanie's dinner parties in November. I'd spent the afternoon preparing hors d'oeuvres and polishing every surface in the house, then served cocktails to her guests with a smile plastered on my face. As I collected empty glasses from the living room, I overheard Stephanie talking to her friend Amanda. "It's actually worked out perfectly," Stephanie was saying with obvious pride. "Maggie handles all the domestic stuff, babysits whenever we need her, and her Social Security covers most of her expenses. It's like having live-in help, except she pays us for the privilege." Amanda laughed appreciatively. "That's brilliant. You should write a book, How to Monetize Your Mother-in-Law." Standing there with a tray full of dirty glasses, listening to my living situation being discussed like some clever business scheme, something crystallized inside me. This wasn't family helping family through a difficult time. This wasn't temporary housing during grief and transition. This was exploitation, pure and calculated. But I didn't confront them that night. I just carried the glasses to the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, and went upstairs to my room. After all, I still had my weekly lottery ticket to look forward to. December arrived early and harsh, along with Stephanie's announcement that they were converting the basement into what she called a mother-in-law suite. She presented this like it was a wonderful upgrade, spreading architectural drawings across the dining room table with the enthusiasm of someone unveiling a luxury vacation package. "You'll have so much more privacy," she explained. "Your own kitchenette, your own entrance. Almost like having your own apartment." The basement. After 2 years of paying them $1,300 a month while providing free labor, they wanted to move me to the basement. Brian hovered nearby, looking uncomfortable but supportive. "The contractor says it'll be finished by spring, and with the kitchenette, you won't need to use the main kitchen as much." Translation: they wanted to isolate me completely, eliminating even the minimal inconvenience of sharing common spaces with their cash cow. "What if I don't want to move to the basement?" I asked. Stephanie's practiced smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, Maggie, we've been thinking about that too. This arrangement has been working, but we're starting to feel like we need our space back as a couple. The basement suite would give you independence while keeping us close. But if you wanted to explore other options, At my age, with $50 a month in discretionary income, my other options were subsidized senior housing with a 2-year waiting list or a studio apartment in the most dangerous part of town. They had me trapped and they knew it. That Friday, I walked to Rodriguez's store with more determination than usual. The sidewalks were treacherous with ice, but I'd navigated worse terrain than slippery pavement. My whole life had become treacherous. "Rough day for walking, Mrs. Thompson," Tyler called as I stomped snow off my boots. "I've weathered worse storms than this," I replied, pulling my $5 from my purse. "Same numbers as always." As Tyler printed my ticket, I found myself thinking about those numbers differently. Maybe it was time for them to represent something new. Something like justice. The winning numbers were announced on Friday night at 10:59 p.m. during the Channel 7 late news. I was in bed reading when the lottery segment came on, and the perky blonde anchor announced that tonight's Powerball jackpot was $53 million. The winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18. For a moment, my brain simply refused to process what I'd heard. Those were my numbers. My exact numbers. The ones I'd been playing faithfully for 32 years. I fumbled for the remote, rewinding the DVR to make sure I hadn't imagined it. There it was again. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18. My hands shook as I reached for my purse, pulling out the lottery ticket with fingers that suddenly felt ancient and clumsy. There they were, printed in black and white. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, PB 18. $53 million. I sat there in the yellow guest room that cost me $1,300 a month, staring at a piece of paper worth more money than most people could imagine. After 32 years of hope and $5 investments, I had finally won. Not just won, I had struck it rich. My first instinct was to run downstairs and share the incredible news with Brian and Stephanie, to celebrate this life-changing moment with family. Then I remembered where I was and how I'd gotten there. In their house, paying market-rate rent for substandard accommodations while serving as unpaid domestic help, scheduled to be relocated to the basement in spring because my presence had become inconvenient. Maybe I should keep this information to myself for a little while. Saturday morning arrived with its typical chaos. Lily and Connor were visiting for the weekend, which meant Stephanie would disappear for yoga and salon appointments while I managed breakfast, entertainment, and general child supervision. It was during this perfectly ordinary morning that Stephanie decided to tidy up the kitchen, which included emptying my purse to look for grocery store coupons. "Maggie, where did you put those cereal coupons?" she called, rifling through my belongings without permission. "They should be in the side pocket," I replied, focused on mediating a dispute between the children over television remote control privileges. "Found them. And oh my goodness, what is this?" Something in Stephanie's voice made me look up. She was standing by the counter, holding my lottery ticket, her face pale with shock. Did you buy a lottery ticket?" My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "I buy one every week. Same numbers for 32 years. Stephanie was staring at the ticket like it might explode. "Maggie, do you know what the winning numbers were last night?" Before I could answer, she was grabbing her phone, frantically searching. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Brian!" Her shriek brought Brian running from his office, hair disheveled, still buttoning his golf shirt. "What's wrong? Is someone hurt?" "The lottery ticket." Stephanie thrust the ticket at him with trembling hands. "Look at the numbers. Look at last night's drawing." Brian took the ticket, frowning as he compared it to Stephanie's phone screen. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, broken only by Lily asking if anyone was going to make pancakes. Finally, Brian looked up at me with an unreadable expression. "Mom, do you understand what this means?" I understood exactly what it meant. The question was whether they did. The next hour was pure chaos, and I watched it unfold from my seat at the kitchen table, like I was viewing someone else's life through a window. Stephanie was pacing frantically, phone pressed to her ear, calling what sounded like everyone in her contact list. 53 million. Yes, million. We won the lottery. We actually won. That was interesting. Brian had taken the ticket from Stephanie and was examining it like a forensic scientist, comparing the numbers on his phone screen repeatedly. "This is real," he kept muttering. "This is actually real." Lily and Connor, sensing something momentous was happening, had abandoned their TV dispute and were standing in the doorway with wide, confused eyes. "Are we rich now?" Lily asked innocently. "We're very rich, sweetheart," Stephanie said, scooping her up for a spin around the kitchen. "We'll never have to worry about money again." I found myself thinking about Bob, wondering what he would make of this scene. Probably something dry about counting chickens before they hatched. "Mom," Brian said, still clutching the ticket like a lifeline, "we need to call lawyers and financial advisors and accountants. There are taxes to consider and claiming procedures and—" "We should call that contractor too," Stephanie interrupted, her business mind already spinning. "Upgrade the basement plans. I mean, if we're millionaires, we don't need to go with the cheapest options anymore." The basement again. Even in the midst of what they believed was life-changing fortune, they were still planning to relocate me to the basement. "Actually," Stephanie continued, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when solving problems, "we should probably think bigger than the basement. With this kind of money, we could buy a bigger house, something with a proper mother-in-law wing. Or," her voice brightened noticeably, "we could look into one of those luxury senior communities for Maggie. The expensive ones with activities and medical care and everything." There it was. The money was going to buy them a more elegant way to dispose of me. Brian nodded enthusiastically. "That's brilliant, Mom. You'd probably be happier with people your own age, right? And we could afford one of the really nice places now." I watched my son and daughter-in-law make plans for my future using money they assumed belonged to them, designing solutions for the problem they created by treating me like an inconvenience rather than family. "There's just one small detail we should probably address," I said quietly. Both of them turned to look at me with expressions of expectant impatience, like parents listening to a child who was interrupting an important adult conversation. "The lottery ticket," I continued calmly, "is in my name." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the shocked silence of unexpected good news. This was the horrified silence of people realizing they'd made a catastrophic assumption. "What do you mean?" Stephanie asked slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I held out my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Brian placed the ticket in my palm. "I mean that I bought this ticket with my money from my purse, using the numbers I've played for 32 years. Which makes it mine." Stephanie's face went through several fascinating color changes. But you live here. We're family. That money changes everything for all of us." "No," I said, standing up from the kitchen table with more dignity than I'd felt in 2 years. "It changes everything for me." The look of dawning realization on their faces was something I knew I'd treasure for years to come. The moment they understood that their unpaid housekeeper, their soon-to-be basement dweller, their convenient source of monthly rent money, had just become independently wealthy, and they were about to discover that $53 million could buy a lot more than a nice house, could buy freedom, could buy justice, and it could buy the most satisfying revenge a mother had ever served to ungrateful children. The kitchen fell so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and Connor whispering to his sister in the next room. "Mom," Brian said carefully, like he was negotiating with a potentially dangerous animal, "let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Yes, technically the ticket is in your name, but we're family. We share things. We support each other." I almost laughed out loud. Support each other. Like when they supported me by charging $1,300 a month to live in their guest room. Like when they supported me by planning to relocate me to the basement. "You're absolutely right," I said sweetly. "We do support each other. Which is why I've been supporting you with my Social Security check every month while providing free housework and childcare." Stephanie's business-trained mind was working overtime. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the desperate search for an angle that would salvage their position. "Maggie, honey," she said, using the voice she reserved for her most important clients, "I think there's been a misunderstanding about our living arrangement. The monthly contribution you make isn't rent. That's just your fair share of household expenses. We've never thought of you as a tenant. Is that so? I tucked the lottery ticket back into my wallet with deliberate care. Then I suppose you won't mind if I stop contributing to household expenses immediately, since I'm family, not a paying customer. Brian stepped forward with his hands raised like he was approaching a wild animal. Mom, let's all take a breath here. This is enormous news. Life-changing news. We need to think through the implications carefully. Oh, I've been thinking, I said. For about 8 hours now, ever since I saw those numbers last night. And I've reached some interesting conclusions. Stephanie's artificial smile was beginning to crack around the edges. What kind of conclusions? Well, for starters, I've concluded that $53 million is enough money to live very comfortably for the rest of my life without depending on anyone else for housing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You're not serious, Stephanie whispered. You wouldn't just abandon us. Not after everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me. Like taking my money every month while treating me like hired help. Like planning to move me to the basement because my presence in their lives had become inconvenient. Like discussing my living situation at dinner parties as if I were a clever investment strategy. I'm very serious, I said. In fact, I'm planning to call the lottery office first thing Monday morning to claim my prize. Then I'm going to start looking for a place of my own. Sunday morning arrived with Stephanie in full crisis management mode. She'd obviously spent the night strategizing, because she greeted me at the breakfast table with a 3-ring binder and her most professional smile. I've been doing research, she announced, opening the binder to reveal printed articles about lottery winners. Did you know that 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years? I poured myself coffee and settled in to enjoy the show. Is that right? Absolutely. The statistics are terrifying. Poor financial decisions, bad investments, family members taking advantage. She flipped through pages of highlighted text. That's why you need professional guidance. Family guidance. Brian appeared in the doorway looking like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, Stephanie's right. This is way too complex for anyone to handle alone, especially someone your age. No offense, but managing $53 million requires expertise in tax law, investment strategy, estate planning. It's incredibly complicated. I studied their earnest faces over my coffee cup. They'd clearly spent considerable time preparing this intervention, working out talking points and strategy. It was almost touching how much effort they were putting into convincing me of my own incompetence. You've given this a lot of thought, I observed mildly. We care about you, Brian said with convincing sincerity. We don't want to see you make mistakes that could destroy your financial security. What kind of mistakes? Stephanie leaned forward, sensing an opening. Well, for instance, buying property without understanding the tax implications, or making large purchases without considering long-term cash flow impact, or trusting the wrong people with your money. The wrong people, I repeated thoughtfully. Like who? Like financial advisors who charge excessive fees, or investment managers who push risky products, or, she paused dramatically, family members who might try to take advantage of your generosity. The complete lack of self-awareness in that statement was breathtaking. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. Stephanie, let me ask you something. When I moved in here, did you research the average cost of assisted living facilities in our area? Her eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt. What do you mean? I mean, did you look up what it would cost me to live somewhere else so you could price my room and board competitively? Brian shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we never thought of it that way. Because I did some research myself yesterday, I continued calmly. The average cost of a private room in a quality assisted living facility around here is about $1,800 a month. That includes meals, housekeeping, activities, and medical support. Stephanie was very quiet now. You've been charging me $1,300 for a guest room and the privilege of doing my own housework, cooking, and providing free childcare. That's not family helping family. That's a business arrangement, and not even a fair one. It's not about money, Brian said desperately. It's about family, about staying together. Is it? Then why were you planning to move me to the basement? Neither of them had an answer for that. I closed Stephanie's binder and slid it back across the table. I appreciate your concern about lottery winners going bankrupt, but I think you're worried about the wrong person making poor financial decisions. Stephanie's professional composure was beginning to crumble. What's that supposed to mean? It means that over the past year, I've been subsidizing your lifestyle to the tune of about $20,000. Meanwhile, you've been planning home renovations and taking vacations while charging your elderly mother-in-law market rate rent for substandard accommodations. Brian looked genuinely confused. Substandard? Mom, this is a beautiful house. With no privacy, no independence, and landlords who treat me like domestic help. I stood up from the table. But that's all about to change. Where are you going? Stephanie called after me. To call my lawyer. The panic that flashed across both their faces was something I'd remember for a very long time. By Monday afternoon, news of my lottery win had spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. Tyler Rodriguez had apparently connected the dots when he saw the winning numbers announced, and by noon there were 3 news vans parked outside Brian and Stephanie's house. I watched from my bedroom window as reporters knocked on the front door, asking for interviews with the mystery millionaire. Stephanie had taken to answering with perfectly styled hair and her brightest smile, clearly hoping to be featured in the coverage. Mrs. Thompson is resting and not available for comment right now, she told the Channel 7 reporter with practiced concern. But as her family, we're just so excited about this blessing in all our lives. All our lives. That phrase was becoming Stephanie's favorite. When I finally decided to leave the house for my appointment with James Mitchell, my lawyer, Brian and Stephanie tried to block my path like concerned bodyguards. Mom, be reasonable, Brian pleaded. You're not equipped to handle this kind of media circus. Let us help you navigate this. Navigate. Another one of Stephanie's corporate buzzwords. I've been navigating my own life for 67 years, I said calmly. I think I can manage a walk to my car. But when I opened the front door, I understood their concern. There were indeed reporters crowding the yard, cameras and microphones ready. The moment they saw me, they surged forward like eager puppies. Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to win $53 million? What are you planning to do with the money? Is it true you've been playing the same numbers for over 30 years? I paused on the front steps, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. Behind me, I could feel Brian and Stephanie hovering, probably hoping I'd retreat back into the house where they could continue their campaign to manage my newfound fortune. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked down to my car with as much dignity as I could muster. I'm very grateful for this blessing, I told the reporters, stopping beside my car door. As for what I'm planning to do with the money, I intend to use it to live independently and make my own choices for the first time in 2 years. What do you mean by that, Mrs. Thompson? I looked back at the house where Brian and Stephanie stood framed in the doorway, and something settled into place inside me. Something that felt like clarity and strength and long overdue honesty. I mean that sometimes you discover that the people you trust most have been taking advantage of your kindness. And sometimes the universe gives you the resources to do something about it. The reporters sensed a story developing, pressing closer with their microphones. Can you elaborate? I've been living with my son and daughter-in-law for the past 2 years, paying them $1,300 a month in rent, while providing unpaid domestic and childcare services. They were planning to relocate me to their basement, because my presence in their main living space had become inconvenient. I could hear Stephanie's sharp intake of breath from the doorway. Now that I have the means to live independently, I'll be finding my own place. Somewhere I can be a guest when I visit my son, rather than a paying tenant in his home. Are you saying your own family was taking advantage of you financially? I looked directly into the nearest camera, thinking about all the other elderly people who might be watching, people who might be in similar situations with their own families. I'm saying that family should be about love and respect, not business arrangements. And I'm saying that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, no matter what your age. James Mitchell's law office was a welcome refuge from the media chaos. At 75, James had the kind of calm, methodical approach that came from 4 decades of helping people navigate life's complications. "Margaret," he said, rising from behind his mahogany desk with a warm smile. "Congratulations. Bob would be so proud." "Thank you." I settled into the familiar leather chair where Bob and I had sat so many times, discussing wills and insurance policies and all the practical details of a shared life. "I saw the news coverage," James continued, his expression growing serious. "Quite a statement you made to those reporters. Was it too much?" "Not at all. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken plainly." We spent the next hour discussing financial strategies, tax implications, and estate planning. James explained everything in terms I could understand, never once suggesting that the decisions were too complex for me to comprehend. It was while we were discussing living arrangements that James revealed his own bombshell. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you. Something Bob made me promise to keep confidential unless specific circumstances arose." My stomach tightened. "What kind of circumstances?" "If your family ever tried to exploit you financially." James opened a thick file folder. "Bob was more aware of Brian and Stephanie's situation than you realized." "What do you mean?" "He knew they were living beyond their means. He also suspected they were planning to have you move in with them after his death, not out of love, but out of financial necessity." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Bob knew." "He hired a private investigator about 6 months before he died. He was worried about what would happen to you." James pulled out a folder of documents. "Brian and Stephanie are in significant debt, Margaret. Credit cards, car loans, their mortgages underwater. They've been living on borrowed money for years." I stared at the papers, seeing columns of numbers that painted a picture of financial recklessness and desperation. "Bob wanted you to have this information if you ever needed it to protect yourself," James continued. "He also wanted you to know about the insurance policy." "What insurance policy?" James smiled sadly. "The one he took out specifically to ensure you'd have resources if Brian and Stephanie became a problem. $500,000, paid directly to a trust account in your name. It's been sitting there earning interest for 2 years, waiting for you to need it. $500,000. Bob had been protecting me from beyond the grave." "He knew," I whispered. "He knew this would happen. He loved you enough to prepare for it." James closed the file gently. "The question now is what you want to do with this information." I thought about Brian standing in the doorway that morning, blocking my path while insisting he only wanted to help me. I thought about Stephanie with her binders full of statistics about lottery winners going bankrupt, positioning herself as my financial savior while she'd been bleeding me dry for 2 years. I thought about Bob, who'd spent his final months not just fighting cancer, but fighting to protect me from our own son. "James," I said finally, "I want to have a family meeting tonight. I want Brian and Stephanie to understand exactly what their financial situation looks like, and exactly how much their mother-in-law knows about it." "Are you sure? Once you reveal this information, there's no going back." I stood up from the leather chair, feeling stronger and more determined than I had in years. "James, I've spent 2 years being treated like a convenient source of income by people who were supposed to love me. My husband saw this coming and tried to protect me. I think it's time Brian and Stephanie learned what happens when you underestimate a Thompson woman." The family meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock. I'd spent the afternoon preparing with James's help, organizing documents and planning exactly what I needed to say. Brian and Stephanie thought they were coming to discuss my emotional outburst with the reporters and find a way to manage the media attention going forward. They had no idea they were walking into a reckoning. Stephanie arrived first, armed with printed articles about lottery winners who'd been swindled by family members, and a laptop full of spreadsheets showing how they could properly manage my windfall. Brian brought a bottle of wine and his most conciliatory expression. "Mom, about what you said to those reporters," Brian began as they settled into the living room. "We understand you were overwhelmed." "I wasn't overwhelmed," I interrupted calmly. "I was finally telling the truth." Stephanie opened her laptop with practiced efficiency. Maggie, we've prepared a comprehensive financial plan that addresses all your concerns while ensuring your long-term security. Before we discuss my financial security, I said, reaching for the folder James had given me, I think we should discuss yours. I placed the first document on the coffee table between us. Brian glanced down at it, and the color drained from his face. What is this? Stephanie asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected. It's a complete financial profile of your household, compiled by a private investigator your father hired before he died. He was worried about what would happen to me after his death, so he did some research into your circumstances. Brian was staring at the papers like they might catch fire. To protect me, I continued, which, as it turns out, was necessary. I pulled out another document. You owe $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards. Your mortgage is underwater by $32,000. You have car loans totaling $18,000. And Stephanie, your consulting business has been operating at a loss for 8 months. Stephanie's professional composure cracked completely. How dare you invade our privacy? The same way you invaded mine when you decided I was too incompetent to manage a lottery ticket I bought with my own money. I kept my voice level, almost conversational. For 2 years, you've been using my Social Security payments to service your debt, while positioning yourselves as generous family members who deserved my gratitude. Brian found his voice. Mom, everyone has financial challenges. Not everyone charges their widowed mother $1,300 a month to live as unpaid domestic help while planning to relocate her to the basement. I placed another document on the table. This is a breakdown of what my living situation has actually cost me versus what it would cost to live independently. You've been overcharging me by about $600 monthly, while extracting approximately $1,500 worth of unpaid labor. The silence that followed was profound. That's over $25,000 a year you've been taking from me, I continued. $50,000 over 2 years. From your own mother. While planning to isolate me further by moving me to your basement. Stephanie was crying now, but they were the kind of tears people cry when they're caught, not when they're sorry. We never meant for it to be like that, Brian said desperately. We needed help and you were family and you thought I was too old and too grateful to figure out what you were doing. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. But your father knew. He saw through both of you. And he made sure I'd have the resources to protect myself when I finally realized what was happening. I placed the final document on the table. This is notification of a trust fund Bob established for me 2 years ago. $500,000 earning interest waiting for me to need it. He also left instructions with James Mitchell to monitor your financial situation and intervene if necessary. Brian was shaking his head like he could make the truth disappear through sheer denial. I don't understand. Dad never said anything. Because he hoped he was wrong about you. He hoped that when the time came, you'd treat me with the love and respect he'd taught you to show family. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Instead, you treated me like a business opportunity. Where are you going? Stephanie called after me. To start my new life. I've put a deposit on a beautiful apartment at Meadowbrook Senior Community. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, my own parking space, and a monthly fee that's less than what I was paying to be your tenant. I paused at the front door, looking back at the 2 people who'd taken advantage of my grief and loneliness for their own financial gain. Oh, and one more thing. Since you'll no longer have my income to help with your expenses, you might want to start planning how you'll manage that $47,000 in credit card debt. I hear financial stress can be very challenging for families. As I walked out to my car, I could hear Stephanie crying and Brian trying to calm her down. But their crisis was no longer my problem. I had $53 million, a husband who'd loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave, and the rest of my life to live on my own terms. 3 months later, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment at Meadowbrook Senior Community, watching the sunrise over the Iowa countryside with a cup of coffee and the morning newspaper. The headline read, Local couple files for bankruptcy following family lottery dispute. I didn't feel vindictive reading it, just peaceful. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their choices, and sometimes the universe provides exactly the right circumstances for that to happen. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler at the corner store. Mrs. Thompson, saw the news about your donation to the community center. Bob would be so proud. Save me a cup of coffee next Friday. I want to hear about your new place. I donated $2 million to the Cedar Falls Senior Center, enough to fund their meal program for the next decade. It felt wonderful to help people who, like me, just needed a little support to maintain their independence and dignity. Brian had called twice since that night, but I wasn't ready to talk yet. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to being mother and son instead of victim and predator, but that would have to be on terms of mutual respect, not financial desperation. As for Stephanie, I heard through the local grapevine that she was working at a call center now. Something about her consulting business closing down, and the bankruptcy making it difficult to find new clients. The lottery officials had been wonderful. The annuity payments would give me $1.8 million per year for the next 30 years, more money than I could ever spend, which meant I could dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people instead of being someone else's source of help. I'd been thinking about writing a book. What I learned when I won the lottery at 67. Chapter 1 would be titled, Sometimes Your Greatest Blessing is Also Your Greatest Truth Serum. But for now, I was content to sit on my balcony, financially independent and emotionally free, watching the world wake up to possibilities I'd never imagined at my age. Bob had been right about one more thing. Good things really do come to those who wait. They just come with better timing than you expect, and sometimes with exactly the power you need to set things right. If this story resonates with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share it with others who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Sometimes the universe has perfect timing, and sometimes justice comes with compound interest.